Hey, it's Marlene. This video is all about how you can go from 0 to birder using the Lumix 100 to 300 millimeter lens. So what got me started as a birder? Well, has to do completely with this lens. I wasn't really a birder before that. I have a short telephoto, the 35 to 100, and I would photograph some birds in my bird feeders and that kind of thing, but nothing like adventurous, let's say. The first time I took this lens out, I encountered a beaver, and it was still winter, and I was doing my photo walk, and I was noticing this blob walking along the ice, and I went, wow, something's moving over there. So I went closer and closer and got the beaver, and that really got me hooked. I thought, wow, if I can do that, let's see what else I can find. There isn't a lot of wildlife for me to photograph in the city, but the birds are great. There's a lot of variety of birds where I live and in the surrounding area, so I didn't have to go far. So what got me completely hooked on bird photography was a family of owls that my parents encountered on their walk one day. My mom called me up super excited and said, "You gotta come over, there's some owls in the trees." And so I went over and started photographing the owls, and I stayed there for a couple of hours the first time I was there, thinking I'd never see them again. And of course I checked again the next day, and then I started finding them every day, and sometimes I'd go back twice a day just to photograph these beautiful owls. And there was 3 babies and 2 parents. And in the beginning, I didn't even notice the second parent was always a little bit in the distance. So I started learning a lot about owl behavior just by showing up every day and photographing them. Now they did move around a bit. There was a row of trees where they were, and initially they were in the tree with the nest, and then I noticed they slowly started moving down to different trees. So every time I went, I'd have to hunt for them. And that was also a challenge, but I knew what to look for. So it was the beginning of my awareness of birds, bird habitat, and bird behavior. So that was initially what got me hooked, and what kept me hooked was a couple of robins started building a nest on my front porch. And I could see them through the living room window, but I didn't want to scare them away, so I didn't go to the nest. I didn't photograph or anything right away. I waited until the babies were born. And when that happened, I actually got a little stepladder, and I had my lens focused on that bird's nest several times a day because so much was going on. Feeding time was amazing. Seeing those little baby robin beaks coming up for worms and grubs was so fun. Of course, it's just a robin, but just to see life happening was really neat. The parents got somewhat used to me after a while. And of course, with this long lens, I didn't have to be super close, and I could get some amazing photos and videos. So I watched them for a couple of weeks because it only takes a couple of weeks and they're out of the nest, and then I never saw them again, and it was kind of sad when the last one fledged. Another thing that kept me hooked was finding pelicans. Now, I live on the prairies, and I had no idea that there were pelicans on the prairies. But pelicans migrate here, so that was really fun for me, and that's when I started learning more about birds in flight and photographing beautiful large birds soaring overhead. It was incredible. The place that I went to was a conservation area. It was called Frank Lake, and there was probably a couple thousand pelicans there the first time I went. So I was totally hooked. Another thing that kept me hooked was the surprises. I couldn't believe how many surprises I found on my photo walks. Now, I intentionally went out to look for birds, and sometimes I wouldn't take my camera, and wouldn't you know it, I'd see a surprise bird, a bird I hadn't seen before. So I'd go back the next day with the camera, and usually if you find a bird in one spot one day, you'll find it in the same spot the next day. It might not be there a week later, but chances are pretty good that it would be there the next day. So I always had my eyes and ears open for surprises. And I even once found a heron, a great blue heron, fishing on the side of the pathway I was walking on, and that was incredible. I was 10 feet away from it. It was just beautiful. And other times I'd looked for herons, and as soon as I got even within like 500 feet of them, they would fly away. So you have to be ready for those surprises. Of course, there were challenges, and one of them was finding new birds to photograph and to keep things interesting for all the videos that I've been making about my journey to a bird photographer. So every time I saw something colorful or something new, I always tried to take photos of it. A huge challenge was capturing birds in flight, especially with a long lens. It's like you're holding a telescope, and I always felt like, there was a lot of challenge getting him in the frame, getting the right focus settings, what focus settings to use. And of course, there was a firmware update in the middle of all my experimenting, so that helped quite a bit. Hopefully you've seen that video on the firmware update for the Lumix G9. So yeah, there was several challenges along the way. I learned a lot of lessons along the way as well. Not just the technical stuff, but a lot of lessons about becoming a birder and becoming present in that moment. Maybe it's a little woo-woo for most of you watching this, but to me it was super important. Birding became meditation for me. It requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of practice. It can be frustrating when you start out, but it's something about just pursuing and trying again, and you learn a lot when you do that. Just a lot about being patient, and that things take time. You have to put in a lot of time to be a good bird photographer. You have to find the birds and you have to figure out the camera stuff all at the same time. And birding means being completely in the moment. You have to really tune in. You have to listen. You have to look. It's not something that I liked to do with other people. I found that I was distracted by conversation. I much prefer to go birding by myself, but I am an introvert, so that's probably why. But yeah, no headphones, just tuning right into your environment, your surroundings, because some birds are hard to find and hard to see and hard to hear. So yeah, you need to watch and you need to listen. And like I mentioned before, you need to pay attention to where you see the birds, because chances are on another day when the light's slightly different, you'll see them there again. And I was lucky enough to find some very unique birds early on in the season, and getting photos of those birds was important for me because it kept me going and it kept me going back to that spot. Now that initial spot where I saw some yellow warblers, well, I've been going back there all summer and haven't seen them in about 4 months. So if you see a bird in a spot, you have to go back right away and find it again. And like I said, you got to be ready for the surprises. When I least expected it, I would find something new or exciting. And that happened about 4 out of 5 times that I went out. In fact, I always thought, okay, I haven't got anything. I've been out for 2 hours and haven't got anything exciting or new or nothing besides a sparrow. It's like, come on, where's that surprise? And I usually found it. So you have to be ready for those surprises. You have to have that camera on and ready for anything. And some days you come home with nothing, and that's okay too. You still get the walk, you still get the meditative practice. And for me, just getting out and walking every day was also very important. And one last tip is get yourself a good bird app. I've got the Merlin ID, the bird ID on my phone, and it also has like a Shazam for birds. You can hold up your phone and collect the bird sounds, and it will also identify the birds by their song. But I didn't have really much trouble identifying them by the markings on the birds, especially if you have a good photo to look at. I often had lots of photos of different angles of the birds as they moved around, so I was really easily able to identify all the species that I encountered. For me, birding is a meditative practice, and it's a very important one. And I hope that you find something that works for you as well, whether that's birding or just doing a photo walk in your coolest downtown neighborhood or going for a country drive and shooting landscapes. Whatever works for you is super important. So take care of yourself, and thanks for watching. If you watch this video to the very end, you are one of the first people to learn that I just purchased the Leica 12 to 60 millimeter lens for this camera. It's an f2.8 to f4. It's for the G series mirrorless cameras, and it's perfect for travel. It's a 24 to 120 millimeter equivalent. And in my next video, I'm going to show you how I use it for for travel photos. See you then.